What's up, guys? We are on Sensible Prepper Live and Prepper School, Volume 14.
Volume 14.
14. Can
It's
you
hard to
believe
believe
that?
we're already 14 episodes in.
14 episodes in. And we're going to be talking about prioritizing or categorizing 10 different things that you need to really think about. And this is something I think is very important because prepping can be overwhelming. And so we want to kind of address some things. We will be taking some questions in a few minutes. So go ahead and get your questions ready. If you want to go ahead and ask them, Sarah Mack's over monitoring the comments. And so she'll start taking some of those. And so when we're ready to go, we're ready to go. Robbie Wheaton from Wheaton Arms, great to have him with us. And he has wheatonarms.com, great Glock aftermarket parts and accessories, the best aftermarket trigger on the market. That flat face trigger is phenomenal. Also does custom gun work. And check out the new upcoming YouTube channel that he's had a YouTube channel for a long time, and he has some instructional stuff, but he's getting ready to do it, really expand it.
Yep. We're really jumping into the YouTube side of it pretty hard. You know, I've done this stuff for years with you, and you know, you've always kind of had your foot in my butt. You're like, come on, you gotta start doing this.
It was a high kick.
It was a high kick. It was. He had to stretch first, but he got there with it, and finally, you know, kicked me out of the nest, and he was like, all right, it's time for you to sink or swim. So, you know, we're trying to fly a little bit. We've got some new stuff we're getting ready to release in the next few days, and we've already got a bunch of tutorial videos, build videos and stuff up on our Patreon channel, and a lot of really cool stuff upcoming for YouTube.
So it's a great resource. And Robbie's been a gunsmith for over 20 years. So there's a lot of experience there.
I think it really gives me a unique perspective on a lot of firearms. And, you know, maybe a perspective that you won't see from some other channels just because of my background and my experience that I have with different firearms.
Right. You're just not an enthusiast or a collector or just a shooter. You're all of them, actually. So great to see that coming up, though. So keep your eye out at wheatonarms.com. And I think you can put just Robbie Wheaton.
Yeah, Robbie Wheaton or Wheaton Arms in YouTube. You can search either way and it'll pull it up.
But we really appreciate Robbie for being here. And also we appreciate Sportsman's Guide. You get $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Sootch. No 00, just Sootch. And it's just a great resource for anything to do with the outdoors.
The world's best prepper store.
And some of the best military surplus. They have tons of military surplus, and that's probably what I buy the most.
Me as well. And you have to check out their Buyers Club too. Their Buyers Club, you get additional savings as well as free shipping on a lot of their items.
Yeah, so it's a great resource. Also, we appreciate Scottsdale Mint. And guys, in this economy, I think that the consumer index showed that we had a 9.5 increase in prices on the wholesale level this week. That's almost 10%, guys. Precious metals will help protect your wealth. I made a pretty large purchase just recently, and guys, it's just smart to have some precious metals. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But today we are going to be talking about categorizing. And when I say categorizing, there's a number of different things because, again, it can be absolutely overwhelming. And I get that a lot with you guys in the comments. Sometimes it's like, well, where do I start? What do I do? And that's the reason for the prepper school in the first place. And so one of the big things to me to start out is, we're going to talk about supplies first. That's number one. And we're not going to get into the supplies you need because there's definitely some basics, right. Your food, your water, your medical, having those things. But here's the problem with a lot of times, and honestly, a battle we fight constantly is making sure that we're not just putting stuff back, but that we're rotating it, that we have maybe off-site, you have storage. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that you got to consider.
There really is. There's so many different considerations with, maybe you don't have enough space to be able to store everything at your home. You have to have a different place to be able to store your stuff and what you want to store, how long you want to store it. Is it moisture and waterproof to where you can store like canned goods and stuff there long term? So a lot of different things you need to consider.
That's right. Temperature control. If you have extreme temperatures, it's going to affect the food. It's going to affect the taste. It's going to affect your nutrition. And so making sure though, guys, we did that a while back where we went through and just categorized all of our food. And there's a lot of systems out there that you can utilize. One thing that I've always seen, and we don't even have it, but it's one of those racks that when you pull one off, it just rolls down to the next one if you're storing canned food. But if you're storing, freeze-dried food, MREs, those kind of things, guys, you've got to keep up with what you have, because you don't want to waste it, and you want to be able to eat some of those things first. One of the things that I always do as far as my food preps is to buy things that we're going to eat.
That's right.
And so that way I can rotate it out by eating and yet having stuff put back. And we've said this a bunch. Canned food is one of the easiest to keep stocked up because there's no real shelf life on it. Yeah. It'll last for 100 years.
And I can tell you from personal experience, you don't want to try and live long-term on MREs. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Old Marine.
Been there, done that. If you've got cases and cases of MREs at your house, you're like, we can live forever on this stuff. No, you can't. I'm telling you, you don't.
It's a temporary fix.
It is. It is a Band-Aid for a wound. So you do not want to try and live forever on those things. It's a stopgap, and it'll fill a gap for short-term food and short-term energy. But that is really what it's designed for, is short-term meal prep, not long-term.
And, I think there's definitely a place for MREs.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's great to have. It's one of those easy things that you can pull out, you can prepare. And that's one thing too. We have a lot of long-term food storage, and one of the things was a variety of food. Mm-hmm. So your supplies, you need to have a variety. You need to make sure you rotate those things out. Another part is you need to check what holes you have. And when I say holes, you may not have a lot of protein. Mm-hmm. You may have a bunch of canned beans, and now canned rice and beans together make a complete protein, by the way. And they're easy to store, but you want to have some variety. You want to have maybe some canned meats and things like that, some kind of, and there's a ton of different things. We're not going to get into specifics because we want to kind of keep it in a category. So, just being able to have a good mix of different things, and then to be able to rotate those things. But like Robbie said, storage is a big problem.
Yeah. And, one thing that a lot of people think of when they think of canned meats, the first thing that pops in their mind is Spam. You got canned meat. Oh, you got Spam. There's lots of other canned meats out there other than Spam. You can get all kinds of different beef chunks, beef cubes. There's tons of different meat choices out there other than Spam. You've got chicken, all of your tuna. You've got your chicken. You've got your tuna. Lots of different fish. So you have a lot of options other than the old standby of Spam. The only thing I want in a Spam can is ammo. That's just me, but
yeah, have a Spam can of ammo and just rip it open. And then too, one thing that we've done over the years is we have an off-site storage area, because we may have something compromised where we are, and so it gives us a backup. Now that backup can be compromised as well. Yep. But it definitely gives you more options. It makes your percentages higher
and more storage capability as well.
Right.
Even if it's not compromised, but it's a long-term situation, you use up what you have at your home, you've got the opportunity to be able to go and draw from your store off-site to be able to replenish your supplies at home.
So number one, getting your supplies organized, and it's not just food. Yep. There are other things, water, and especially if you live in a more urban area where you don't have a lot of room. You've got to be really creative.
That's right.
But one thing that I will say about being in an urban, especially even a suburban area that's right outside of a major city, is you really need to have thoughts of another area, a place that you're going to go to, and you may have some offsite supplies at that location. So just and two, you're on the way out. You can stop by your area. You can load up. You can go. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, considering where those areas are. If you have a storage, like we have a storage unit, I even did a video on it, and it's our cache. And we have a small storage unit. I have a buddy of mine. We split it. We load that thing up, and we've got it. But we don't want it in a bad part of town. And that's where you're going to get your cheapest rent. But you don't want it to where it's vulnerable to being ransacked. Okay, so number one. Number two is know-how. Now, one of the things about prepping, and I've seen this over and over and over, especially with people that are just getting started, is they have all this stuff.
Right.
They've got their knives, they've got their fire kits, they've got their water, whatever. They've got all this different stuff, but they don't know how to use it.
Yeah. And for me, know-how and the supplies almost run in parallel with one another.
Definitely.
Because you have to have the supplies, but you have to have the know-how to be able to use everything that you have. You have to have the know-how to be able to use the supplies to be able to utilize the know-how.
Right.
So they run hand in hand with one another.
That's right. Well, let's take MREs, for instance, since we're on MREs today.
Yep. It's an MRE bashing show.
Man, yeah. Well, actually, they have this heater system that's in there, and you can heat it up, and knowing what to do. Knowing before you have to have it, testing some things out. You may have Mountain House food. You may have gotten some for Patriot. I've been watching those commercials. We've ordered some. Get it out and test it. One thing that we did, and I've mentioned this a few times, is when we had our prepper group, we had a fire starting clinic, and they all had their fire kits. I mean, they had their strikers, they had all their knives, they had their matches, they had all that. But then trying to put a fire together, it was very awkward. You need to be practicing those skills because you don't want to. I mean, you can learn, and there is a learning curve for sure. But if you're doing that ahead of time, and batoning wood, everybody watches it on YouTube. Everybody, it's nothing fancy. He's over here batoning wood, and I do too. I baton a lot of wood. Until really, a lot of times it was funny because they were like didn't know how to grab it, and weren't sure about where to do it, and that's when you can hurt yourself.
You watch these survival shows on TV, one of the more popular ones like Alone. And how many people have been removed from the show because of an injury they sustained while batoning wood or chopping wood?
Oh, sure.
Several. Cutting stuff with their knife, with their hatchet, with their axe, and next thing you know, they've cut themselves because of, they were distracted, they were hungry, inattention to detail with what they were doing. Doing things like that, batoning wood and chopping wood, it's a perishable skill, absolutely, and it's something that you want to do over and over and over to get used to doing it, get comfortable to do it, and also having the proper PPE when you do it, personal protective equipment. You want to make sure that you protect yourself when you're using sharp tools, leather gloves, cut resistant gloves, things like that. That'll prevent, if something does happen, a blade slips, that you don't have a bad laceration from it.
Yeah, and in a grid down situation, you may not have medical help.
That's
or they may be just overwhelmed. And so you want to make sure that you stay even safer than you do just going out in the yard and doing some yard work. But then you become proficient. This also includes firearms training. Guys, just because, and this, just because you have a gun doesn't mean you really know how to use it.
Just because you watch Sootch doesn't mean you're going to learn it through osmosis.
You may learn some stuff there, all right.
You're not going to learn it through osmosis. It's getting out and doing it.
Having malfunctions, knowing how to deal with it, knowing how to be familiar with it. Then also self-defense with, doing, maybe even taking some classes, training, learning. It's a constant struggle, but yet it's a constant way to learn more and more about the basics. And to me, that is a great challenge. It's something that you should embrace. But if you're a prepper, you need to be immersing yourself into these things as things ramp up, and things are ramping up, guys. Things are definitely ramping up.
It's ironic that you mentioned self-defense and, striking, grappling, things like that. If you're not used to striking and you punch somebody and you haven't punched things in the past, you haven't built up this cartilage and muscle mass and bone mass in your hands, there's a really good chance that if you strike someone and you haven't developed that bone mass in your hands, you're going to break your hand or break your fingers. So it's something a lot of people don't ever consider. They're like, oh yeah, I can throw a punch. Well, sure, one punch is great, but when you break your hand, what are you going to do for the second one or the third one? Right. And then for 6 weeks down the road, when you have to use both of your hands to be able to baton wood, open up cans and things like that. So getting out ahead of time and getting you a heavy bag at home, working your hands out and developing the bone mass in your hand. So if you do have to throw a strike, you're not going to break something. Or if you don't have the time or the ability to be able to do that, know how to strike that's going to protect your hands without injuring yourself.
Well, if you watch videos a lot of times of self-defense, like real world self-defense situations, and a lot of times people just don't know how to fight.
That's right.
They don't know. And, so this one guy, he knows how to fight. He can dominate the situation, even if he is weaker.
That's right.
So females, and this is definitely towards you, that would be one of my priorities, is getting some kind of self-defense training physically. And so, you watch people that they're awkward and they don't know what they're doing. They're flailing, and they're not putting any power behind it.
It's always funny when you watch it on YouTube. You're sitting there looking at it and you're like, everybody's laughing, watching the this whole number here. Yeah, it's a joke. But when it's for real and when it's you don't want to be this person, all right? You want to know what you're doing and at least have some skills to be able to get you through that situation safely.
All right, it gives you some confidence.
That's
okay,
right.
We're going to hit this number 3, and then we're going to go to some questions. So if you have some questions, you can go ahead and start putting those together. Plans, having some plans. One of the things, though, that I like to do is get on Google Earth or whatever and look at the area that I live in. Also, having physical maps, knowing the routes in and out, knowing what points could be jammed up. You may come up on a roadblock and you're not able to go somewhere, and having that plan, having plans with your family. Hey guys, if this happens, this is some things that we need to do. One of the big ones, and this is not even an SHTF type situation, but if you have a house fire, have a meeting point. Everyone goes to this point. And that's one of the things we've done, because there have been people that have gone out of a back door and they're standing there, and then the people in the front don't realize it, and somebody goes back in and dies. In fact, that's happened a number of times, especially with children. And so having those plans, but also plans around other things. One of the big ones is bug out. That's one of the main topics for a lot of bug out, for a lot of preppers, is my bug out, and you stress all this on bug out. And, that's the most dangerous situation you can put yourself in. That may be necessary, but that shouldn't be your number one thought. Bugging out is taking everything you possibly own and going somewhere, and then you're vulnerable. And then you're also a glorified refugee. So you're just out there with the belongings you have. So having a plan, though, to where are you going to bug out? Hey, we're going to jump in the car and we're just going to go. Hey, you got to have a place, and you can't run out in the woods. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, and those things need to be thought out a little bit ahead of time.
That's one of the things where I'm a big planner when it comes to things like that. And I love to make lists. All right. And this with prioritizing the what ifs. What if? All right, you've got a what if, and you've got your what if list. What if we have to bug out? And my list. What if this happens? What are we taking with us? What are we packing? How much time do we have to pack? Where are we going? Do we have our maps? And my list has got everything on it that we'll need if we have to bug out. My cache has got everything in it that we have. I've got a list that has everything stored in our cache. So I know that I can go to my list, and it's got all of my food preps in there. It's got all of my blankets, my lights, my batteries, and it's got dates beside it for when I put everything in there. So I know when things need to be rotated out. But I'm a huge big proponent of making lists to help keep you on track and help keep you focused. And instead of stressing and your mind's going in 1,000 different directions, when something bad does happen, when you've got a list that you can sit down and go down and check off, check, it really helps to settle you and to calm you and really keep you focused.
Well, it's like when we go to the range, we have a list.
Mm-hmm.
So we make sure that we have things, because we have gotten to the range and forgotten our tripods.
Yeah.
Well, that shoots me for us, because we do a lot of video. It shoots it.
Or camera batteries.
I know it's me that forgets it. Sarah Max looking at me. Or camera bat or whatever. But here's the thing, guys. When the situation starts to turn raw, if you don't have a list, I mean, how many of us have walked out of the house and went, there's something I'm missing. There's just something. Now, when we talk about prioritizing your ifs, listen, if this happens, if that happens, if this happens, before long, you're just beside yourself. You can't even figure it out. Yep. The big thing is to prioritize your ifs to saying, okay, what are the most probable things that are going to happen? Not these wild Martian invasion, or whatever, or, Mad Max scenario. Not necessarily the extremes.
Don't forget Bigfoot.
Yeah, Bigfoot. Yeah, you got to watch Bigfoot.
That's right.
But having those ifs prioritized to say, okay, this could possibly happen. So let me plan toward that in this and kind of set up, not to get in this big. I mean, if we go to what ifs, we can go forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so prioritizing those and considering the things that are probable, not necessarily possible. And then as you get prepared, you can kind of go toward the Martian invasion.
And Bigfoot.
And Bigfoot. Okay, let's take some questions, and we'll see if we can help you guys out.
Okay. Mitika asks, how long can you survive with only what you have in your bug out bag? Do you recommend city areas or woods?
Well, for one thing, 3 days is typically what most people think about when they talk about a bug out bag.
Yep.
It's a 3-day bag. And that's if you just have a bag on your back. That is the worst situation. I'm just telling you, that is going to be the worst situation. But being able to pack out your vehicle, and we're going to get into a little bit about vehicles in a minute, but first off, obviously, if you need to bug out, as long as you can get in your car and go, that is the best way to do it. And you can put a lot more supplies in there. You can carry a lot of things. If you have a big trailer on the back, it's one of the things that John Lovell over at Warrior Poet Society, he talked about. It was a really good video, and it's talking about I'm ditching my bug out bag. And I think James Yeager is another one that talks about the supplies you really need. I mean, it's a lot. Now, here's the problem. You get out on the road, and then you run into traffic jams or dead stop traffic, and you have to go on foot. And so, if you're in a city situation, there's a lot more vulnerability because of possible unrest. I mean, look at New York City right now. I mean, it's a disaster area. Chicago, those places already, and we're not really in technical SHTF.
That's right.
So you get a situation where food is not there and you are going to be hunted down. And so I would definitely steer clear of populated areas as much as possible. But there's going to be more food and supplies where there's civilization. So there's a balance. So I highly recommend, let's see, what John Wesley Rawls, his Liberator, and Survivors. Those are excellent books. John Wesley Rawls, Survivors. And I think that's the first one. It really gets into bugging out, to traveling across country in a situation where things are not right.
Tiot asks, how long can food like fruits last that are packaged in plastic containers?
Not as long. And typically there'll be a best by date on them, and they'll last longer than that, but they start to lose their potency, their vitamins, their nutrients. They start to lose taste. But in packages, it's not going to, it'll last longer than some things. But I don't know the exact date on that. It takes probably a couple of months or so.
Yeah, and it depends on how it's stored, the temperature and everything. The one thing to look at if you're really wanting more long-term storage with fruits is either freeze drying or dehydrating. That's going to allow your fruits to last a lot longer before they spoil.
But canned food, one of the things about canned food is the pressures and the sanitary environment and the heat and everything that goes into canning food. It seals it really extremely well. And then they seal the cans now. They used to not. It used to be just a metal, food touching metal, but they've actually put a sealant in there so it helps to keep the taste even better. And so that canned fruit will last a long time.
That's
the problem
that'd probably be your number one choice for fruit.
Yeah,
long term.
I would think so. But the one thing is if you have like something that has a high acidic to it, is high in acid, it'll actually eat through the can. Tomatoes are one of the ones that'll do it.
Yep.
Roger S. asks, hey guys, how do you feel about a homemade water filtration system using the Berkey filters?
Yeah, there's a lot of plans out there. I've seen them using plastic buckets, doing some things. One of the things I love about the stainless, though, is you can keep it really clean and sterile more than you can a plastic bucket, because it can build up mold and sediment and things like that because it's a little bit more porous. But I think that would be a great option.
That's definitely a low cost option for sure.
Definitely.
Iberian Link Survival asks, hi guys, do you think primitive survival skills are indeed useful today?
Yes, to a point. Yeah, I think that, now to me, a lot of times the bushcrafters kind of go with that real primitive thing, the theme. They want to get down to, even flint and steel and things like that. I think that if it was extended, if SHTF was extended, that could be even more and more important. But I think there's a lot of technology out there that's going to keep us necessarily from going all the way into that element. But if I lived in Africa, in the middle of the jungle, that's what I'd have to do. I'd have to deal with that.
Yeah. The big thing that I look at with bushcraft survival is the things that it does offer that is relevant for today. Water gathering, processing meats, be it, game animals or fish. How do you properly process it? How to build a fire, how to keep a fire going long term, how to use a fire for cooking, how to use a fire for heating. Those are a lot of elements of bushcraft survival that are definitely applicable to today's society. Going out in the middle of the woods and living out in the middle of the woods for years on end is not necessarily applicable, I don't think, just because of the way our country is, our situation that we have. Most people are still going to have a home. You're still going to have a place to live, but you're going to have to be able to provide essentials for yourself. It's like your meats, your vegetables, your fruits, your heat, and it may be alternate sources that you're getting all of those items, not necessarily just from a grocery store or picking up the phone and calling the power company and saying, "Hey, I need some gas this month." So being able to provide yourself those alternate skills is some of the things where bushcraft is really going to be applicable.
I had one guy one time that really kind of came down on some of the things I was talking about, because he said, well, I can live out there for years. I've been doing this. I've been doing that. And I was like, sure, you might. But 99% of the people that I'm talking to right now can't. And so I highly recommend learning bushcraft skills for all the reasons that Robbie just mentioned. I mean, those are excellent. So, but I think that, if you're learning bushcraft skills, it takes a lot of labor, takes a lot of energy, and your food, your calories, going to burn a lot of calories. You're going to have to eat more. So, if you can do it without it until you need to. But I think it's a great way to learn and to understand the basics of survival.
It goes back to know-how. It's just other tools that you have in your tool belt in case you need them.
Okay, we're going to one more question, then we're going to jump back into the list, and then we'll take some more questions in a few minutes.
Might be asked, magnesium stick or ferrocerium rod?
I like ferrocerium rods. Magnesium is great, and you can shave it, and you can use it, and that's definitely an option. And then it has the little striker on there. But I prefer ferrocerium rods because they just create a really good spark, and they're hard. You want to make sure you have your tinder. Now, if I don't have tinder, because I typically keep tinder with me, I have either Vaseline cotton balls or the little tinder tabs, because it makes life a heck of a lot easier. But that's going to sooner or later run out. So having the magnesium bars can be a great option, because it does do the shavings, and you can get that spark kind of flare up. So I think having both in your kit, because on fire kits, I am all about redundancy. I'm about a Bic lighter first, a Bic lighter. Then I'm going to have a torch lighter. Then I'm going to have some waterproof matches. And I'm going to have my, having different things.
And, one thing that I've seen recently is you can buy magnesium shavings by the pound. And they're pretty lightweight. You can find them on Amazon. 1 pound of magnesium shavings, they're like $10 or $15.
Wow.
And that's a lot of magnesium. And, that's going to allow you to be able to store or pack or carry a lot of tinder, and using magnesium for your tinder with your ferrocerium rod to start a fire, that you're not having to sit there and go through the time and trouble and effort to shave it to be able to get a fire going. You can go ahead and buy it pre-cut, pre-ground, whatever, and save you a lot of time.
Okay, let's go on. We are gonna come back to some questions, but we're gonna go ahead and continue with our list. Okay, groups. We have addressed this a number of times, and it's called MAGA, Mutual Assistance Group. Now I'm lost my brain. Mutual Assistance Groups. What is it? MAGA. Man, I'll tell you what, my brain, when you're on live, it's like there's no editing. Anyway, mutual assistance groups. It's MAGs, M-A-G-S. That's why I couldn't do it. I was thinking of MAGA, like
Make America Great Again.
No wonder I couldn't figure it out. I was thinking, what the heck's the A about? Okay, MAGs, and that's mutual assistant groups. That's one thing that's really important, because if you're a lone wolf, your chances have really dropped considerably. You can't stay awake 24/7. You can't keep security. You've got to do all the work. It's great. People are the best resource.
Absolutely.
We need each other. they say no man's an island, and guys, I'm sure there's some of you out there that can possibly do it, but you are few and far between. It really takes a group of people. Now, for us, we have our prepper group, and that's our core. That's the people that we count on. And we exchange ideas. We talk about different things. We plan things together. We train together. If something happens, if Robbie needs something, of course, Robbie and I are already friends, but I'm there to help. And with a group like that, you can develop some really strong relationships. One thing that I would highly recommend is to get to know people and to really invest in people. That's one of the big things. Now, then we have what we call our network. And those are the people that are really not in the group, but they're prepper minded and maybe they live in another location. And so we have this network of people that we can call on, and maybe, Sarah Max in Charlotte in North Carolina. And I say, hey, I called my buddy. I said, hey, she's up there. She needs some help. And so, having those type people around. Your neighbors, they may not be prepper minded. You may not even feel comfortable talking about it. You don't want to talk about it because you don't want to come into your house looking for food later. But developing your neighbors, your friends, developing these people to just have a trust factor.
That's right.
And a confidence factor. And then prospects, people that you won't talk to them now, but maybe in a tough situation, they're a prospect that you can kind of talk to and maybe bring them in. And so building a good group, using that group of people to be able to help and to do things, because really, 3 heads are better than just one, and 2 heads are better than one. And having ideas bounce off, it'll help you to make better decisions.
That's right. 4 heads are best of all.
Yeah, 4 heads, 4. Don't have an 8 head. Okay, so groups. Now, security. We've addressed security, but security is one thing that you need to consider ahead of time.
Yep.
Your security systems, your lighting around your house. Some people talk about, in a grid down situation, they want to make the house look abandoned. I'm not really big on that, because for me, if I was looking for something, I would go to that abandoned house first, because I would be saying,
nobody's there.
There's no threat there.
Yep.
And so, that's one thing though, that it's just one of those things, but to me, having security, having layers of security, we've addressed this in one of the prepper school things, but making sure that you have your security situation straight. One of the things that's the worst is to put it off. Don't put it off. You need security, and you need to think about it, even in today's world, as much as anything.
That's right. And security is, it's like anything. You can spend as little or as much on it as you want. Layered security with motion alarms, with cameras, with door break, glass break alarms. It's all layers. A fence around your property. Each one of those is a layer to slow people down, slow things down, and give you an earlier warning and give you more time to prepare and be ready.
Right. And then also dividing your supplies, which is part of security. If you have all your food in one location and somebody breaks in and there you are and they take your food, it's good to have a second supply somewhere if possible. Again, that gets into space, it gets into storage, it gets into a lot of things. But if you're able, it's really smart to be able to separate some of your food supplies if you have to. We have ours separated in 3 different locations. So we've got food in one location. If we're compromised and somebody comes in, they're going to take that food possibly. And then we have other food left over. So that is, again, just part of security. Okay. Let's see. We have, references. Building a library of really good books. It's vital, because if the internet's down, or if, you're not able to get on there and look around, you can't even use your phone. Maybe the phone service is down. Having ready some references. You can't know everything. You can't. I've been doing this for 30 years. Yeah. I don't know everything. And there's more and more that's coming up. And situations change. So having a lot of the basics of your survival skills and different books that help you to understand, reading the Going Home series. It's a great novel series. And there's a lot of nuggets all throughout. but trying to remember where I found those nuggets can be difficult. So I like to have regular survival type books. Maybe it's bushcraft, maybe it's just on, the SAS survival guide has a lot of information in there. But having those references, so building a library. And guys, you can get on eBay or Amazon and you can buy those used books really cheap, or you can go into a bookstore that has a ton of books. You might be able to find something there.
Big ones for me are books on edible plants, plants that I can use for different medicines, and be able to keep those as a reference, because like you said, one day this thing might not be here, and we're gonna have to have something that we can refer back to that is a reference manual or a guide to be able to steer us in the right direction. If you're hungry and you're looking at a plant, you're like, can I eat it or not? You have a book that has all of your edible plants in your area, in your state, in your region, and you can flip through that book and find that plant, then you know if it's edible or not. So it's a good reference to be able to have these materials on hand in case something does happen and you're not able to access the interweb anymore.
Well, another thing too is there are ways to figure out if food is edible. Sometimes you can rub it on your hand if it starts to rash, if there's certain things like that. And again, those are reference points. U.S. Air Force survival manuals are good for the pilots, and because they're going to be down in who knows where.
Right.
And there's a lot of great information. So having those books ahead of time and having them set up to where you can get to them if you need to. And two, even if it's a CD of all the prepper schools. Right.
That's right.
Because we won't be here when all that happens. We'll be doing our own thing, surviving. So anyway, that's a big one, is having some kind of references. And then, now this is big, is money. As we see the economy starting to have some issues, and hopefully we'll pull out of it, guys. I'm hoping that things will turn around and we'll kind of get back on it. But again, 9.5% increase in wholesale goods this past month. I guess it was the month,
right? And
it may have been the week, but the prices are going up. That means that your dollar is worth less. So before you could go out and buy a can of beans. We're talking about this the other day. Robbie could go out and get a can of beans for 77 cents. Now it's $3. Well, that just means your dollar's worth less. So first off, money, you do need to have some cash put back. And we've mentioned this a number of times, having a cash, and it's according to what you do. I mean, it's according to how much you can afford. It may be $200. It may be $2,000. It may be $10,000. But I wouldn't store up too much cash. Because inflation will eat it away. A lot of times in hard situations where inflation's running, people will run their cash and they'll go out and buy durable goods, because it retains a value to it. And then you can sell those goods. It's a pain in the butt, but it's something to be able to protect your cash. But the other thing is, and one I'm huge on, is precious metals. And precious metals are great because they protect your wealth. Right now, I went out this past week. I purchased quite a bit of precious metals, and we put them back. One thing I've done, and this was actually from a good friend of mine, I took the precious metals and I figured out at this point right now, they're worth this. I can pay my bills for this long. How long can I pay my bills with that? And so I put up a buffer. So precious metals. And when things really start to go down, right now, prices have kind of inched up on precious metals, but they're being depressed. And when that really starts to take off, you're going to put yourself in a good situation. But also barter items. Barter items are currency. And if you have things that you can trade and wheel and deal with, that is part of your money. And so having that set aside, because one thing, guys, and we've seen this over and over all over the world, is when economic times start to happen, banks close, ATMs run out of cash, those kind of things. When we had this snowstorm, I made sure that we had our cash set aside in case we went to the store and the ATMs or the credit card machines weren't working. And if that's the case, they can't do business. And so having cash, you can actually buy some things. Okay, which leads to the next thing. What marketable skill do you have in a grid down situation? It's like my brother, he's an IT guy. If power goes out, there he is. So what is he going to do to be able to, or what am I going to do, or what's Robbie going to do to be able to produce income to take care of our necessities, take care of our food, our water. Yes, we have our supplies and everything, but over the long term, what are some skills, some marketable skills that you have that will be useful in SHTF? One thing, we did a video, in fact, one of the prepper schools, it's about hobbies that you learn that you can develop into. It may be candle making, it may be weaving, it may be, metalwork. I heard Dave Canterbury say this, and this was really a good one. He said, if you know woodworking and metalworking, if you can figure out and you have the skill and you have the tools to do it, you may not have electrical tools. And you may. The thing is with grid down, you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. But if you have those, you can about do anything. And that is a very marketable skill as well. It may be security. There's a number of different things. But you personally, what is it that you can do if things go south? And developing some of those skills now as a hobby would lead you into being able to survive in a grid down situation. Blacksmithing, pottery. I mean, the list goes on. There's a ton of things. And you have to kind of think back about, like Civil War days, 1800s, 1700s and beyond before. So those are things that are definitely something to really consider, because your 401k may be
401j.
Yeah, 401 gone. Yeah. Or your stocks, bonds, retirement programs, those kind of things could be in jeopardy. Now, I'm not trying to scare you to death. It's just the way things are, though, and we've seen it.
It's just being realistic about what you see, the signs that you see going on today.
Well, the thing is, you're in a comfortable situation. You're doing fine. You don't have to really worry about it. You're kind of moving along, and then something happens. Well, it's not like, oh no, something's happened. It's like, okay, what's plan B? What do we got to do now? Okay, let's go to some questions again. And before we do that, we really appreciate Sportsman's Guide. And it's $100 off every $20 or more purchase using Sootch, and that is store-wide, and that is website-wide.
Marilyn Brower asked, what can we prepare for with this Russian problem?
Woo! That's a situation. The thing is, Russia's been on the border of the Ukraine for a number of years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually hear that they're actually pulling troops back. But one thing is to plan for possible nuclear exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, they're the number 2 nuclear power in the world. They're our biggest adversary.
Yep.
And to get into an all-out war, who knows what could happen.
And we touched on that a little bit last week in volume 13 of Prepper School, with things to look out for, and how, one of our biggest worries in the early 80s was nuclear war. And it's kind of coming full circle back to that again. In the early 80s, the 70s and 80s, people were building fallout shelters in their backyards to be able to protect them from nuclear fallout in case of nuclear war. And you're starting to see some of that again today, with people looking at nuclear war as something that could potentially happen and starting to prepare for that and get out ahead of it now.
Yeah, we are gonna do a video coming up on nuclear fallout, how to survive it, and all that. But let's back off from that. That is extreme. I mean, that's another one of those what ifs.
Yep.
But it's still something you need to consider. But one of the big things to me, if something like that starts to happen, we're going to see a drop in supplies.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be able to get the supplies as readily. And we're already seeing a scarcity already. And so we're going to see prices go up. There's going to be a lot happening. And so that is one thing, during World War II, one of the big things was a victory garden, and they rationed gas, and they rationed tires, and they rationed this, and they rationed that. And so, we could possibly have a lot of shortages if there was a real full out war starting.
Not even nuclear.
Yeah, just a straight out war. So, the big thing is we go over to Afghanistan and we just have a big, there's money going and the economy's going good, and that's great. But we're seeing a downshift in the economy. We're seeing with whether it's COVID related or just government intervention or tons of people crossing the borders illegally. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are happening right now. So so that really gets us in. If we get into a serious war, a full out war, we could definitely see some shortages. But consider the nuclear and do some research. There's a lot of information online.
Ryan Miller asked, "Hey guys, I'm curious what a teenager could use for self-defense options."
Well, I'm going to tell you, number one is a good flashlight. And I know that sounds crazy, but having a good flashlight, that's one of the most used self-defense tools. If it's a good flashlight that you can have this bezel coming out of the end and you can defend yourself this way. And two flashlights, you can carry them anywhere.
And I would say your mind is going to be your number one tool, and situational awareness, being aware of what's going on around you and not being in situations or in areas where things could turn south. If you're like, oh, I want to go over here with my friends this weekend, and you fill in the butt with whatever, it's probably not a good place to be. If you can take yourself out of certain areas and certain situations, it's going to eliminate a lot of the times where you would have to use self-defense.
But the thing is according to where you live,
Yep.
If you're carrying a knife, that may be a problem, down the road. You get caught with a knife. But there are things that you can use that are non-lethal that can be used. In fact, I did a video on improvised self-defense options. One is that you can take a magazine, which we don't have magazines as much as we used to, but we do have them. You can take a magazine, tightly roll it up, and it is an excellent self-defense tool. The CIA used to use those all the time. They'd roll it up real tight, and it makes it really solid. And you take that end, and you can use it as an impact tool. You can use different things like that. But communication skills are great.
Yep.
And that means talking yourself out of a situation, not allowing your ego to take over. One of the problems I had when I was a young teenager was, I just ran my mouth, and sometimes I'd get myself into situations. I know that surprises a lot of you, but when I should have just kept my mouth shut and just walked on. But the big thing is avoiding situations like Robbie said. That's probably the number one thing. But a good flashlight's definitely a good backup.
Absolutely.
If you're not.
What do y'all think? I feel like I'm fairly well stocked on food and water. I have a Berkey light also. Keep stocking food and water or start focusing on medical and reloading supplies?
You need medical. Medical is important, but with the COVID mess that's gone on, it's really screwed up our medical system.
Yep.
If you have to go to the hospital now, they're typically just telling you to go to the emergency room, and it's a nightmare there. So I highly recommend having medical. And two, medical can be overstressed, but also getting good medical training. And there's a number of different classes out there, stop the bleed classes and trauma classes and all kind of stuff that are really important, because one thing about medical to a lot of people, it's like this black magic. Oh my gosh, but when you take those classes, you understand that it's not really that difficult. The skill to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is one of the big things to do is medical. But also, yes, reloading, the tough part of that is primers are skyrocketing. They're crazy prices, so it makes it really difficult. But ammunition is coming down in price right now.
Yeah, it has been. And to go back to what we were talking about earlier in the show with supplies, you're recognizing that you have some holes in things that you have right now. You're good on food, you're good on water, but you have some holes when it comes to your ammunition. You have some holes when it comes to your medical supplies. So now is a great time to go ahead and start filling those holes to where you're kind of level across the board with your food, with your water, with your reloading self, with your medical supplies, and then whatever else you need as well.
Yeah. And then making sure that you have tools that can help you, manual tools. You may have a chainsaw, but if you don't have any gas, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Chosen to Preach asked, I put in my bug out bag birthday trick candles for if the wind blows or something. Is that a great decision?
Yeah. They definitely will hold up. But anything you can use to, and I would have that as part of my fire kit,
Mm-hmm.
but I would add other things. They do make some really good candles now, because one of the things you want to do in a situation like that is to protect yourself from the elements. In the rule of threes, you have 2 hours in harsh conditions, and that can be heat or cold. And then when it rains, that adds a lot to it. But yeah, finding shelter Finding shelter. So then the candles will be fine if you really had to have them, but if you're in shelter, you don't have to worry about it as much. But actually, that's kind of funny. That's actually a pretty decent, pretty good idea.
I think that's the best one I've heard all day today. That's awesome.
Ryan Miller asked, would a medium Alice pack work for a bug out bag?
Oh yeah. Especially one thing I like with the Alice packs is that they've got the aluminum frame, which makes it a little bit more cumbersome, but you can put a shelf on the bottom of that thing. They make shelves that came with them, and you put it on the bottom. You can actually carry like heavier items, putting them on that shelf. You can carry ammo cans put on there. I've done that. I did a video about the Alice packs years ago. But that is, I mean, obviously they were tested for many years. And so it's a great, I mean, they were in the field. I mean,
they work. They work. I mean, that's all you can say about them. They work. There's a ton of storage space in them. They're modular where you can add things to them. With the pack frame, you got to have the pack frame. The pack frame really helps to distribute the weight across the pack and across your back and shoulders and your hips. But yeah, it's a tremendous pack for longer term, for like a 3-day pack. Bug out or get home pack. The Alice packs are a great option.
Jason Smith asked, what are some good shoes?
Well, it's important. Shoes are very, very important, and socks. But having a good pair of sturdy shoes, one thing first off, before I get into any kind of brands, is you want to make sure that you get those shoes and you break them in, because you don't want to put on a new pair of shoes and then walk 10 miles. Your feet will be destroyed. And then, of course, Robbie's always big about extra socks.
I am huge on extra socks. Yep.
But there's a lot of great shoe companies out there, boot companies. I'll tell you, one that's of reasonable price is LA Police Gear. They're side zip boots. I had a pair of those I used a number of years ago, and then I bought some more, and then I did a test. I bought them, and then I did a 1-year test on them. And they're super comfortable, but they're easy to put on because they have the side zip. You can have them laced up, put your foot in, zip it up. And I love them so much that I bought the entire family a set of them. And so that way they have some boots. In fact, Sarah Mack wears hers a lot to the range. But that's a really excellent choice. But then you've got Danners, and you've got the Cochrans, and you've got, Keens. I wear Keens. But there's a ton of different. But I would highly recommend getting good quality boots.
Yeah, and the bigger thing to me over the brand of the boot is making sure that it fits you properly. If you've got a wide foot, you don't want to get a shoe or a brand that traditionally makes narrow shoes. They're not going to fit. Your toes are going to be bunched up. They're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to get blisters, and then you're going to be down. So going to a store where you can try on a bunch of different shoes and make sure you have plenty of room in your toe area. That's one of the first places you get blisters, is in and around your toes, because a lot of shoes bunch your toes up in the end. So finding shoes that give you plenty of room for your toes to be able to move around and breathe and get some air in there so they stay drier longer is going to help you out a lot.
But yeah, there are a lot of great brands out there.
Yep.
So a good quality brand, and do some research, get online. Again, feet are different for everybody.
That's right.
And so look up, some people really like this boot, but yet for you, it may not work. So I would just, and look at reviews. Reviews are really invaluable.
Especially for the durability.
Right.
Look at the durability side of it. And then once you narrow it down to 3, 4, 5 different brands, then go try those 4 or 5 different brands on and see which one fits you the best.
David Fiorini asked, is it possible to bug out on foot in the winter? I just know how one can carry, I just don't know how one can carry everything in a pack. The pack would be huge, wouldn't it? By the way, I'm waiting on the 2022 EDC update.
I'm working on it. That anytime you put a pack on your back and you're walking for miles and you're not used to it, it is a nightmare. Yeah. Bugging out is especially on foot, is like the worst case scenario. That is like, our house is on fire. We're being attacked by raiders, and we got to just get out. We got to grab our bags, and we're running out the door. In the wintertime, I mean, and obviously people did that back when our country was young, and men would strap on whatever, and they'd take off with a coonskin cap and a leather beaver pelt, around their, that's one thing. But guys, that is not something that you want to base everything around. On the other hand, if something were to happen. Having a plan is good. It's just not going to, it's not going to be good in the long run. So that's something that, to me, I would avoid as much as possible, but you definitely want to have a plan. You can't carry everything.
That's
you
right.
Can't. And so you've got to limit yourself. And that's why I look at 3 days, because I want my 3 days of food. I want my water filter so I can filter water. I don't want to carry 3 days of water, because that's 3 gallons. That's 8 pounds a gallon.
That's another 24, 25 pounds on you.
That's just a big waste. You need to have a container for water, and you need to have your basics, your fire kit. You need to have some cordage. You need to have some kind of shelter you can put together, a tarp or a sleeping bag or a tent. It adds up. But if you think 3 days, what can I do to survive? Then you can base your bag on that. But to go past that, you're in trouble.
And how far can you go in 3 days? And are you going to have a resupply point after 3 days to where you can have more supplies stored in a cache somewhere?
Right.
That's really what you need to look at, is if you have to take off on foot, you have no other choice. Where are you going to be able to resupply, and how are you going to be able to resupply?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and finish out the list. We've got 2 more things to talk about, and we're going to get through them quickly because we have about 5 minutes, which we really appreciate all those questions. Those are really good questions. Vehicles. Speaking of bugging out, but you need to make sure your vehicles are serviced. Make sure they're up to date. Make sure the oil is changed on a regular basis. Make sure your tires are good. If you need, right now, I've got to get tires for my Hummer. So it's time to go get the tires. I don't need to put it off. I need to go do it. Plus, the prices are going to rise every day. But making sure that you have everything up to date. If you've got something going on with your car, have it fixed. Do it now. Keep your gas tank full. Top it off. Always keep it over a half tank. I am really good, typically, at keeping my tank full. But this weekend, Sarah Mack was going to jump in the car and go somewhere. And she says, "Dad, you don't have any gas." And I was like, "Oh, shoot." Because we'd been to the range a couple of times. We've been just running and running. So make sure, because you don't want to get caught in a situation where you're on empty and you got to go and there's a lot going on. So keep that. Also, make sure that you keep gear. We always keep our get home bags in our car and sometimes other supplies. And so make sure that you do keep those in there. Don't pull your bags out and in and out, and then all of a sudden you forget them. Make sure you have a bag in there. So your vehicles are very important. And then maybe there's some things you want to upgrade. You want to do some things. You want to put a roof rack on it. You want to set it up to be able to travel, to make it more effective. As things get a little squirrely, if you start watching things ratchet up, then start thinking about how can I don't want to go downtown with this rack and I saw a car yesterday with a rack on top, and he had ammo cans packed in there, and he had some gas cans and, some tarps and stuff. And I thought, that's cool. But, people look at you like, what the heck? But as things go kind of a little crazier, those things are going to be more important.
And people also look at you as a target of opportunity.
That's true. That's true. Very true. Okay. This is the last thing, and this is something to consider, is long-term. Right. Typically things they get back to a normality. They get back to some normalcy. But there could be an extended period. So start thinking this spring about your garden. What am I going to do
now about your garden? Gathering your seeds, your tools, and everything that you need. But right now, February, March is the time you gather all of your stuff, and that way, the end of March, the beginning of April, especially where we live, we're already planting by then.
Yeah. So, go ahead and start getting that together. Your water, what are you going to do with water? We use the big Berkey that filters our water. What if we have a cutoff of water supply? Oh, I got a pond down here. I'll just get my water. And then you're going to be deathly sick if you don't die.
That's right.
There's cryptosporidiums, giardia, and everything else. So make sure that you have some plans to be able to filter that water and to transport that water. But just the regular supplies and tools and things you need for a long-term situation, what are you doing there?
Toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet. That's a short term, But those are things that you want to consider. All right. So that's the top 10. This list is actually in the description, so you can go down and just check it. And we should have everything there. And of course, this will be live. It'll be part of our Prepper playlist. So if you want to watch this later, and honestly, thousands will watch this after the live.
Yep.
So it's really great to have your questions. A lot of times people are looking, and your comments. So we really do appreciate you being here. Guys, really, it's time to get serious about prepping. And it's funny because I've been hearing that for a long time, but the way things are going right now and ratcheting up, it's a great time to get yourself even more prepared. Use that as a motivation to get yourself in that situation. So again, we really appreciate Sportsman's Guide for sponsoring today's episode. $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Sootch. No 00, just Sootch. And
check out their Buyers Club as well. Their Buyers Club, you get additional savings as well as free shipping on a lot of goods.
And if you are looking for precious metals, Scottsdale Mint, I've known Josh there for over 10 years. Guys, solid company. They mint coins for over 20 countries around the world. These guys are top notch. They're dependable. They're honest. They're just awesome. And I highly recommend you getting some of your assets into precious metals. You got them in your hand. And also we appreciate, I start to say Johnny Mac. I don't know where that came from. We appreciate Robbie Wheaton for being here, and wheatonarms.com. Check it out. They have a lot of Glock aftermarket parts. He's been a gunsmith for over 20 years, and he does custom gun work as well. And I'm going to kick his butt until he gets his YouTube channel. He's got it coming. Everything's coming. They've got a ton of videos already rolling. So.
We do. We'll have our first set of videos will be up on our YouTube channel this week. You can search Robbie Wheaton or Wheaton Arms, either one, and be able to find us on there. But some really, really great content coming up on our YouTube channel. And then we also have our Patreon channel with all of our builder series on there. And we're adding new videos weekly over there as well for building different firearms, gunsmithing, as well as a lot of other really neat, cool stuff.
The stuff we can't put on YouTube.
That's right.
All right. So, and we appreciate Sarah Mack. She set us up, answering the questions, watching everything, keeping us in line. Keeping us in line.
Sure.
So, guys, we really appreciate it. Thanks for being here. And again, this is part of a playlist. This is number 14. So we have a number of different ones if you want to go back and check them out. So be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.